This week's Parsha. This week we begin the book of Devarim. It's the last book of the 5 books of Moses. We've traveled through the desert. We're at the end of the 40 years. This book is the book that is given over by Moses. Moses, who is the prophet like no other. He has shepherded the Jewish people. He has liberated the Jewish people from Egypt. He is the one through whom God gave the Torah, gave the law. He is the judge. He is the teacher. He is the shepherd. And he is the lover of the people of Israel. He advocates for us. He goes with us into all of the places that we go. He travels along with us and tries to help us. And in this book, he's giving over, this last book of the 5 books of Moses, he is giving over the history of what happened. He's giving us the laws again. He's reminding us what it is and helping us as we're about to go into the land of Israel, helping us live our best lives. And it begins, this week's Torah portion begins with a series of descriptions of places that the Jewish people traveled in the desert. And we talked about it last week, but this week it's being brought up as a form of rebuke. Remember when you were in this place and you worshipped the golden calf. Learn from that lesson. Remember this place where you complained about the manna from heaven, where you wanted meat to eat. Remember this place where you complained that there was no water and you had to learn how to trust in God. So Moses is reminding the people of these places so that they will learn the lessons that are needed to be learned, so that when they go into the land of Israel, they will be equipped and they will be ready and they will be able to live in that land without all this spiritual infusion that they had in the desert, where God was so obviously with them, traveling in their tabernacle, giving them food from heaven, giving them water from a rock, taking care of their every needs. Moses was there teaching them the Torah. Moses is not going into the land with them. Moses is going to stay back, and that Joshua is going to take the people into the land. And this is the last will and testament of Moses to the people, saying, I love you. I need you to know all these things so that you don't fall into the same trap that you fell into in the desert, where you didn't trust in God, where you felt that God wasn't going to advocate for you, wasn't going to take care of you, wasn't compassionate, wasn't all of these things. You need to learn these lessons so that when you go into the land of Israel, you'll know that God is with you. And I think it speaks about connection. It speaks about the need for connection. So when Moses is rebuking the Jewish people, he's doing it from a place of love, right? So perhaps people can hear it. Also, they know he's going to die. He's going to die. So a man on his deathbed who's not going to listen to the messages that he's telling, he's no vested interest other than the love he has for the people, to say, watch out and take care to be connected to God always, to know God is always with you. So Moses is giving the rebuke at the end of his life. He's giving it with love. He's saying less and not more. He's not going on and on and on. He's just saying, remember this place and remember that place. And you can infer from the places that I'm mentioning what it is that you need to learn, what it is you need to learn. He also gives a blessing at the end, which we'll learn about a little bit later at the end of the Torah reading. He at the end of the book, he gives the Jewish people a blessing. And again, so it's done with love. It's less, not more. It's done with blessing. It's done in a kind way, and it's done with a veiled way, and it's done very gently. But I think the message is stay connected to God. Even when you're in the land of Israel where it's not so obvious, stay connected to God. And if you go back to the beginning of creation, when God created the universe and he separated the upper worlds from the upper waters from the lower waters, we learn in the Medrash that the lower waters cried because they were disconnected from God. They didn't want to be in the lower world. They wanted to be up in the high heavens. And it says that they cried because they wanted to be close to God. And I think that brings us to the idea of tears and what tears do. And here we are on the cusp of Tisha B'Av, which is the one of the most sad days in the Jewish calendar. It's this coming Sunday, and it's the day where we remember many things. It started with the episode of the spies, which is, again, we learned about earlier, but now Moses is bringing it up. Remember when you sent in those spies, and the spies came back, and they were anxious. Maybe we can't go into the land. Maybe the people there will see us as grasshoppers, that we're little and that they're big, and we're going to be defeated, and we can't go in. And they bring the people to a frenzy, and they start crying. They cry tears of fear, tears of disconnection, tears that maybe they won't be able to survive in the land and they don't want to go in. And this is a day of tears. It's a day when the spies came back Saturday night, Sunday. It's the day the temples in Jerusalem were destroyed. It's the day that the Spanish Inquisition began. There are many tragic things befell the Jewish people at this time. And it brings us to tears. And I want to talk about tears. And again, going back to the book of Genesis, when Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, it is said that they were given two gifts that they could use in exile. One gift was the gift of Shabbat, was having the Sabbath, this day to connect to God, this day to disconnect from the physical world. They were also given the gift of tears, the capacity to open their hearts, the capacity to express the deepest soul of a person. It says that the tears are our soul sweating, that the open heart and the access to our soul manifests itself in tears. And when we feel disconnected, then the tears flow. And it said that at the end of days, when the world comes to a completion, when the world is whole, there'll be no more tears. We won't cry anymore because we won't need, perhaps the tears come from a disconnection. When we're disconnected from God, we're disconnected from each other, when we're all scattered, then we have tears in the world. Then we suffer losses, suffer pain, we suffer these disconnections that happen all the time in our lives, separation from people, separation, mourning the loss of things that we dream about that don't happen. And we mourn those losses and we're sad for those losses and we cry over those losses. And at the other end of the spectrum, we cry when we're super happy. A joyous wedding, we're crying when a baby's born. We're crying. What's that crying about? And perhaps it's crying about the vision that what could be, how there is disconnect in the world and it's not fully whole. And I'm crying because I'm happy. I'm crying because I'm seeing something very emotional happening. But there's also perhaps an element, and certainly at a wedding when we smash the glass under the chuppah, there's a recognition that the world isn't whole. And those tears have many, many, many functions. And I heard a very interesting or lovely Yiddish proverb which says that what soap is for a baby, tears are for the soul. What soap is for a baby, tears are for the soul. They wash us, they cleanse us, they heal us. It's our soul sweating. They restore and they refresh us, they heal us. And we're told they open the gates of heaven. And when we cry in authentic prayer, the gates of heaven are wide open and we're bringing back a connection. We're opening up our hearts, we're accessing our soul. The tears are flowing and we're connecting in a very transcendent, huge way. And so I think we should see tears really as a gift. Sometimes we tell children, don't cry, but maybe in children they're crying over spilt milk, but there's something about tears that is very, very soothing and very refreshing. If you just let the child cry it out, they feel much better afterwards. And so too, as an adult, we have to be strong and we can't cry, but there's a role for crying. There's a role for tears. They're a gift given to us while we're in this world of disconnect. They're a world to help us experience the full gamut of the emotional spectrum that there is to have in the world, right? We can get to those lows and we can also get to the highs, but if we don't get to the lows, we don't get to the highs. And I think that this full gamut of the expression that there is to have is facilitated by having tears that come out, that they come out. So when I mentioned that the beginning of time, when the waters, the lower waters were separated, that they cried, there are other times God cries. It says that God cries on Tisha B'Av. When the temple was destroyed, God's crying. And there's a story about God going into an inner chamber, whatever that means, and there was an angel that said, let me cry for you. And God says, no, I need to do this. I need to cry. Whatever that means, that there's a crying that goes on in the heavens when there's a disconnect, when the Jewish people turn their back on God, when we're disconnecting ourselves from the wholeness that there is, the wholeness and the oneness of the world. When we do that, God's crying along with us. It's also said that angels cried. The angels cried at the binding of Isaac when Isaac was on the altar and Abraham's about to bring the knife to his neck. It says the angels are crying. The heavens opened up and their tears fell into the eyes of Isaac. I don't know what imagery that is, but it's imagery of disconnect. Like, what's going on here? How can this be happening? And there's a disconnect and there's tears. And also we cry a lot. And I think it's a good thing to cry. I think it's a good thing to let those emotions out, to wash it like soap is to a baby, to wash our hearts, to wash our souls, to let that soul sweat. And so here we are on the cusp of going into the land of Israel. Moses, our prophet, our leader, our shepherd, the one who loves the Jewish people the most, is advocating for us, is suggesting and telling us, be careful when you go into the land. Make sure you stay connected to God. Make sure you connect to the Torah and to the ways in which you connect to the wholeness of the world. And if we do that, we'll get to this vision. This Shabbat is known as Shabbat Chazon. It's the Shabbat of vision. And the vision is the wholeness that we're heading towards, that there's a goal that this world is heading towards, and we all have a role to play in that. And each one of us is a piece, is a chelek, has a role to play to bring the world to wholeness. Each one of us in our own individual ways, as we connect with each other, we connect with ourselves, we connect with God, we're beginning to repair the world and bring that oneness. And please God, we'll have a time where there'll be no more tears, there'll be no more death, there'll be no more loss. There'll only be connection and unity and wholeness.